The winter air of February 1945 clung heavy to the pine forests of Wisconsin. Ice cracked beneath the tires of a U.S. Army convoy as trucks rumbled toward the gates of Camp McCoy, one of the largest prisoner of war facilities in America. Inside the covered transports, dozens of Japanese women sat in tense silence. They were nurses, clerks, radio operators, and wives of Imperial naval officers captured across the Pacific as the tide of war turned irreversibly against Japan. For many, this was their first time seeing America. They had expected to die before surrender, but the collapse of island garrisons, the sinkings of transport ships, and the chaos of evacuations had left them with no choice. Some had been pulled from the wreckage of Saipan. Others had been captured after hospital ships were intercepted. All carried the same dread, that captivity at the hands of Americans would be worse than death itself. Among them sat Ayako Tanaka, a 27-year-old former administrative assistant in the Imperial Japanese Navy. She clutched a thin blanket against the cold, though her body shivered less from the winter air and more from the terror of uncertainty. Since childhood, she had been told that Americans were brutal, dishonorable, and merciless. Teachers had described them as monsters who would defile women and laugh while prisoners starved. Propaganda films had shown caricatures of Western decadence, overweight soldiers too weak to fight without machines, leeress men without honor, women corrupted by consumerism. Now Ayako was in their hands, and every breath of her journey was haunted by those images. The truck jolted to a stop at the camp's perimeter. Searchlights swept across the road, reflecting on barbed wire and guard towers. American sentries with rifles slung across their shoulders watched closely as the women climbed down from the trucks. Many Japanese prisoners kept tipper eyes fixed on the frozen ground, unwilling to meet the gaze of the supposed barbarians. One nurse whispered a prayer under her breath. Another bit her lip until it bled. What met them, however, was not the cruelty they had braced for. The American guards gave curt orders through interpreters, but their tone was more procedural than hostile. Line up here, follow this way, collect your belongings. The women were herded toward the processing building, a low wooden structure with smoke curling from its chimney. Inside they were surprised again. Instead of humiliation, they found an organized system. Clerks recorded their names. Doctors gave them cursory medical checks. Each woman received a prisoner uniform, wool skirt, blouse, and sweater marked PW in large white letters. The fabric was coarse, but warmer and cleaner than the worn clothes many had arrived in. They were issued blankets, shoes, and socks. For women who had lived through months of shortages in Japan, threadbare garments, patched slippers, soap made of ash, these simple items felt impossibly abundant. Yet fear remained. "This is only the beginning," whispered Harumi Sato, a 24-year-old nurse captured in Saipan. "They will strip us later. This is the trick before the cruelty." That first night, the prisoners were taken to wooden barracks lined with bunks. Each bunk had clean sheets and a real mattress. A coal stove glowed in the center, throwing off a steady heat. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, many women slept without shivering. Still, the rest was uneasy. They lay awake, listening for footsteps, waiting for the punishment they had been promised by their government. At dawn, their expectations seemed fulfilled. The sound of boots echoed outside the barracks, followed by the creak of the door. An American female officer entered, flanked by 2 Red Cross workers. The officer spoke through an interpreter. "Today, you will be escorted to hygiene facilities. You will receive showers, grooming, and medical checks." The words froze the prisoners in place. Grooming! To them, the word carried sinister meaning. They imagined forced head shaving, humiliation, even defilement. Ayako's throat tightened. She remembered stories whispered in Tokyo classrooms that Americans humiliated their captives by stripping away dignity, mocking them until they broke. Surely this was the moment. The women were lined up and marched to a brick building near the camp hospital. Steam drifted from vents on its roof. Inside, tiled walls gleamed, and the air smelled faintly of soap. Showers! Real showers! The women hesitated at the threshold. "Go in," ordered a guard through the interpreter. They shuffled forward, eyes wide.
Each was handed a towel and, to their astonishment, a bar of ivory soap, smooth, fragrant white. Harumi clutched hers as though it were contraband. She had not seen real soap since 1942. In Japan, civilians scrubbed their skin with sand or rice husks. Soap rations were measured in scraps the size of coins. And here, in the hands of an enemy, she held a bar larger than her entire family had seen in years. The showers themselves were private, curtains hung between stalls. Warm water cascaded freely, steady and plentiful. At first the women stood trembling, waiting for the trick, the laughter, the insults, the guards bursting in to humiliate them. But no one came. Only the steady rhythm of water striking tile. Slowly hands lifted, soap lathered. For some, tears mixed with suds. One prisoner whispered, "It feels like a dream." When they emerged, wrapped in fresh towels, they expected to be marched back to barracks. Instead, an even stranger sight awaited. In an adjoining room, rows of American women stood beside tables covered in combs, curling irons, nail polish bottles, and lipsticks. They wore simple uniforms and smiled nervously as if unsure how they would be received. The interpreter explained, "These women are volunteers from the Red Cross and local communities. They will cut your hair, clean your nails, and provide grooming. They believe every woman deserves dignity, even prisoners." The Japanese women gasped audibly. Their worst fear had been head shaving, the symbolic erasure of womanhood. Instead, they were being offered beauty treatments. Ayako's legs felt weak. She whispered, "It must be a trick." But Harumi shook her head, eyes fixed on the lipstick tubes. "No, look at their faces. They are serious." One by one, prisoners were seated in chairs. American beauticians gently brushed their hair, trimmed ends and styled it into neat waves. Some painted fingernails with soft pink polish. Others handed out magazines, Lady Home Journal, Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, glossy pages filled with images of smiling women in elegant dresses, modern kitchens, and sunlit American suburbs. The shock was profound. Prisoners who had arrived pale and fearful now sat staring at reflections they could hardly recognize. Lipstick-brightened lips once cracked from malnutrition. Polished nails gleamed against wool sleeves. Ayako blinked at the woman in the mirror. Herself, yet someone she had never seen before. At first silence hung heavy. Then, hesitantly, someone laughed. Another smiled. The sound spread, fragile but real, echoing through the salon. For the American volunteers, it was also a revelation. Many had expected sullen hostility. Instead, they saw shy gratitude, even wonder. A farmer's wife named Ruth whispered to another beautician, "They look like schoolgirls on their first dance." But for the Japanese prisoners, the experience was more than novelty. It was a challenge to everything they believed. They had been told Americans were barbaric, cruel, inhuman. But here, enemy women treated them with gentleness. They offered not humiliation, but dignity. That night back in the barracks, the women spoke in hushed tones. Harumi fingered the pages of Vogue. "They live like this, with electric kitchens and closets of dresses." Another whispered, "I thought lipstick was banned in war. They have enough to give it away." Ayako lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The phrase from earlier returned to her. Every woman deserves dignity, even prisoners. She had lived her whole life believing dignity belonged only to loyal subjects of the emperor. Could it be that dignity was something given freely, even to enemies? She did not know the answer, but she knew one thing. Whatever awaited them in America, it would not be the nightmare they had imagined. The barbed wire was real, but so was the soap, and perhaps, just perhaps, the lipstick. The beauty salon sessions at Camp McCoy did not fade after that first shocking day. Instead, they became a Saturday ritual, a strange ceremony of contradictions, enemy prisoners receiving the trappings of elegance from the very nation they had been raised to despise. By the third week, anticipation replaced dread. Women who once feared humiliation now whispered eagerly about lipstick shades and nail polish colors. Even those who clung to notions of Japanese pride could not entirely resist the allure. The sight of their own reflections, cleaner and brighter than they had appeared in years, was irresistible. Ayako, who had resisted at first, now looked forward to Saturdays with quiet longing. She remembered Tokyo, where by 1944 even combs were scarce, soap was rationed in crumbs, and women went months without trimming their hair properly. Here she felt shampoo foaming between her fingers, the scent of lavender filling her lungs. The experience was so alien that it sometimes frightened her. It cannot last, she told herself. This abundance is temporary. They will take it away. Yet week after week it returned. One afternoon, as her nails were being painted pale pink, Ayako asked the American beautician through an interpreter, "Why do you do this? We are your enemies." The woman, a farmer's wife, paused only briefly before answering, "Because being a woman doesn't stop during war. Everyone deserves to feel human." The words echoed inside Ayako's mind. To feel human. It was a concept she had never considered in those terms. For years she had been told her worth was measured by loyalty to the emperor, by sacrifice, by obedience.